The first time Kale set foot in the Karthos Grand Arena, the sky was a pale, endless blue, and the crowd's roar hit him like a physical force. Aliens of every shape and color filled the tiers, their voices blending into a deafening chorus of anticipation. This was no ordinary pit fight. This was the opening match of the Triumvirate Games, an event broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Kale, a human from the infamous Deathworld called Earth, stood bare-chested under the sun, the scars of a lifetime of survival etched into his skin. His opponents had trained for glory. He had trained for survival. That difference, he knew, would matter. The announcer's voice, booming and slick with artificial reverb, introduced each fighter with grandiose titles. Kale was simply the Deathworlder. The crowd jeered at the simplicity, but he didn't care. He'd been called worse, in far less forgiving places. His opponent lumbered into the sand, a towering four-armed reptilian from a high-gravity planet. Its armor glistened with ceremonial gold inlays, but Kyle saw the gaps where movement required flexibility. That was where his strikes would land. The fight began with a rush, the reptilian's lower arms sweeping low while the upper pair aimed for his head. Kyle dropped into a roll, sand spraying behind him, and came up inside his opponent's guard. His bone-handled blade, forged from the claw of an earth predator, sliced deep into the alien's side. The crowd gasped, not at the wound, but at the speed. Deathworld reflexes were faster than most species could track. The reptilian bellowed, in rage, stomping forward with crushing force, each step shaking the sand. Kale danced just outside its reach, forcing it to overextend. On Earth, he had fought creatures that stalked silently for days before striking. Here, he could read his opponent like an open book. Each breath, each twitch telegraphed its next move. When the killing blow came, it was sudden and clean. Kale stepped into the reptilian's final swing, ducked low, and drove his blade up into the unarmored throat. The alien collapsed in the sand, blood pooling beneath it. The arena went silent for a breath, then erupted into thunderous applause. The Deathworlder had arrived, and the galaxy had just been given its first lesson. Humans do not break. In the shadowed corridors beneath the arena, Kyle was led by two insectoid guards toward the gladiators' quarters. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the stench of alien physiology. Along the way, other fighters watched him from behind cell bars, predators sizing up a rival. He met their gazes without flinching. On Earth, locking eyes meant you were either ready to fight or ready to die. The quarters were little more than cages, though some were fitted with primitive comforts. Kale's was empty save for a water basin and a pile of hay. He preferred it that way. Soft beds made one forget how to sleep lightly. From across the hall, a voice called out in a hissing accent, "Deathworlder, they'll pay to watch you die." Kyle smirked but didn't answer. Let them think him silent. Silence was the space where fear grew. That night, he listened to the sounds of the arena settling, chains clinking, creatures breathing, the faint hum of energy fields. He ran his hands over the scars on his arms, each one a memory of something that had tried to kill him. Earth had been his first arena, and compared to its jungles and predators, this was just another hunting ground. In the morning, they gave him a new opponent, a gladiator famous across the star systems, a hulking mammalian beast known as Grath, the Unbroken. Rumor claimed no blade had pierced his hide, no fighter had forced him to kneel. Kale didn't believe in invincibility. Every creature bled. The only question was how much pressure it took to make them. As Kale stepped into the arena, again, the sunlight warm against his skin, he scanned the stands. This time, he noticed a group of high-ranking alien officials seated in a private box, their eyes fixed on him. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was being evaluated. and that was dangerous in a way no blade could match. The bee gong signaled the start, and Grath charged like a battering ram. Kale sidestepped, but the impact of the beast's passing was enough to rattle his bones. The alien turned faster than Kale expected, swinging a massive warhammer with surprising precision. Kale ducked, feeling the wind of the weapon pass just over his head. In the crowd, the officials leaned forward. Grath's hide was like stone, his muscle density far beyond anything Kale had faced. Slashing would be a waste. He needed to target joints and eyes. The Deathworlder shifted tactics, darting in with quick feints, forcing Grath to swing wide and overextend. The arena floor became a dance, each movement calculated to draw out mistakes. Finally, Kale saw his opening. Grath lifted his warhammer high, exposing the inner elbow of his leading arm. Kale lunged, driving his blade deep into the tendon. The beast roared, dropping the hammer. Kale seized it mid-fall, the weight immense but manageable. Now, the weapon was his. With brutal efficiency, Kale swung the warhammer into Grath's knee, shattering bone. The giant toppled, his bulk sending tremors through the sand. Kale climbed onto his back and struck once, twice, until the creature lay still. The arena shook with cheers and disbelief. The Deathworlder had not only survived, he had humiliated a legend. In the private box, the officials exchanged glances. One leaned toward the others and spoke into a comm device. Whatever was decided in that moment would change Kale's path forever. Kale was not returned to his cell immediately. Instead, he was led to a chamber deep beneath the arena, its walls lined with banners from dozens of alien worlds. A tall figure awaited him, draped in silver and black, with eyes like molten metal. "You fight as if you were born for war," the alien said in perfect standard. "Tell me, Deathworlder, do you wish to die for sport, or live for something greater?" Kyle didn't answer right away. He studied the alien's posture, the careful way his hands rested near the hilt of a ceremonial blade. This was no mere noble. This was someone who had seen battle. "Depends," Kyle said finally, "on who's paying and who needs dying." The alien smiled faintly, as if Kale had passed a test. "You have outlived opponents who have crushed entire clans," the alien continued. "What would you say to outliving empires?" The question hung in the air like the edge of a knife. Kyle knew a recruitment pitch when he heard one. The alien introduced himself as Lord Veyran, strategist to the coalition of the Outer Rim. He spoke of ancient rivalries, corrupt thrones, and the need for warriors who fought beyond the confines of rules. Kale listened, but didn't commit. Trust was earned in blood, not words. When Kale was finally escorted back to his cell, he sat against the wall, eyes closed. The arena was no longer just a cage, it was a gateway. And if what Veyran said was true, the battles ahead would make these games look like children's sparring. Somewhere deep in his chest, Kale felt the old fire of Earth's jungles burn hotter. The galaxy thought him a spectacle. Soon, it would learn he was a storm. Kale's next days in the arena were a blur of violence and calculation. Each match brought opponents more exotic and lethal: a telepathic cephalopod with bladed tentacles, a crystalline entity that shattered into shards with every strike, a swarm of hive-born insectoids that fought as one mind. Kale adapted, surviving, where others would have fallen. But the victories felt hollow. The cheers of the crowd were the same. The sand always stained the same shade of red. Late one night, the hum of the energy field outside his cell flickered. A shadow stepped inside. It was Lord Veyran, unaccompanied. "Your matches are a distraction," Veyran said, tossing a datapad at Kale's feet. On the screen was an image of a sprawling alien city, half in flames. "This is Karvek Prime. A rival empire burns it as we speak. The coalition needs a fighter who can go where soldiers cannot." Kyle studied the images. streets littered with bodies, enemy war machines prowling the ruins. It was war, not sport, and it was familiar in a way the arena was not. "What's the job?" Kyle asked. "You infiltrate," Varen said. "You kill their commander, and you send a message that the galaxy will never forget." Kyle almost laughed. It wasn't much different from surviving Earth's predators. Only now the prey was armed and organized. Before dawn, he was smuggled out of the arena in a cargo transport. No fanfare, no audience, just the cold hum of engines and the weight of a mission. Kale wasn't sure if he was leaving the cage behind or stepping into a bigger one. Karvik Prime was a wasteland when Kale arrived. The once proud towers of its capital lay in jagged heaps, their metal bones twisted by orbital bombardment. Smoke blotted out the sky, and the air tasted of scorched ozone. Kyle moved through the ruins like a phantom, wrapped in scavenged armor, stripped from fallen soldiers. The enemy patrols were numerous, but they moved like predators who thought they owned the ground. Kale knew that arrogance was a death sentence. From alley shadows, he struck, quick, silent, and final. The first patrol he eliminated never even had time to radio for help. As he closed in on the enemy command post, Kale found signs of survivors, frightened civilians huddled in basements, clutching crude weapons. They weren't fighters, but they had the same look he'd seen in the eyes of Earth's villagers when danger closed in. It was the look of people who'd been given no choice but to endure. The commander's stronghold was a fortified plaza, ringed with heavy guns. Kyle studied it for hours from the roof of a ruined hab block, noting patrol cycles and blind spots. There was no straight path in, but he didn't need one. Deathworlders didn't win by playing fair. That night, under cover of smoke and sirens, Kale scaled the outer wall, dispatching guards with lethal precision. Each kill was a step closer to the target, each breath a reminder that survival was his oldest skill. The commander was not what Kale expected. Instead of a towering warrior, he found a gaunt, cybernetically enhanced strategist surrounded by holographic battle maps. The alien's eyes glowed with the blue light of implants, and his hands were clasped behind his back as if he'd been waiting. "You're the Deathworlder," the commander said without turning. "The one they whisper about. I wondered when they would send you." His voice was calm, almost amused. Kyle approached without speaking, his blade drawn. "You think killing me will end this war?" The alien continued, turning slowly to face him. "Empires do not die with their leaders. They die when their enemies refuse to fear them." Kale's only answer was a swift, brutal strike to the throat. The commander's body fell, and the light in his eyes went out. The chaos began instantly. Without orders, the enemy lines fractured. Kale slipped back into the night, leaving the stronghold in disarray. By dawn, coalition forces were moving in, sweeping through the crippled defenses. From a rooftop, Kyle watched the battle unfold. He wasn't a soldier, but he'd just shifted the balance of a war. And he knew something the galaxy didn't yet understand. One fighter from a death world could be more dangerous than an army. When Kale returned to the coalition, Lord Varen didn't meet him in secret. This time, he was brought to a council, chamber filled with leaders from a dozen species. Holoscreens replayed footage of Karvik Prime's liberation, the story of the ghost in the ruins already spreading. "Your actions destabilized an empire," Varen said before the council. "Imagine what he could do with resources." The aliens murmured, some in agreement, others in unease. They weren't sure if Kale was a weapon or a threat. One counselor, a feathered dignitary with eyes like polished obsidian, leaned forward. "You are not one of us. Why fight our wars?" Kale met the gaze without flinching. "Because predators don't get to own the world they hunt in." The council voted, narrowly, to grant Kale provisional command over a strike team. It would be a unit built for missions no sane soldier would take. The kind of missions where survival wasn't expected. Cale didn't care about titles, but he understood the value of a team that could watch his back. As he left the chamber, he passed warriors from across the galaxy, each assessing the Deathworlder with new eyes, some with admiration, some with envy. And some, he could tell, were already planning to test him in the field. Kyle's strike team was unlike any military unit in the Coalition. There was Threx, a four-armed reptilian brawler whose people considered pain a sport. Nivra, a silent shadow climber from a high-gravity moon. Tolan, an insectoid marksman who could hit a coin from half a kilometer. And Dren, a half-machine demolition. Expert with a laugh like breaking glass. Their first mission took them to the ruins of Orvanis, a city swallowed by jungle after centuries of abandonment. Hidden beneath the overgrowth was a weapons cache left behind by an extinct empire and now sought by three rival factions. The Coalition wanted it secured before anyone else could seize it. The jungle was hostile, alive with things that could pierce armor and vanish into the foliage before you could scream. Cale moved like he was back on Earth, reading signs in the ground and the canopy. His teammates followed, uneasy. When the first rival faction arrived, it wasn't a fight. It was an ambush. Cale's plan unraveled in the sudden roar of gunfire and alien war cries. But instead of retreating, he led the team straight into the attackers, using the terrain to scatter them. Deathworld tactics were about control through chaos, and Cale excelled at it. By nightfall, the cache was theirs, the rivals driven off, and the jungle silent again. But Cale knew the real danger wasn't the creatures or the factions. It was how fast the team was starting to believe they were unstoppable. The second mission came without warning: sabotage an orbital shipyard deep in enemy space. The facility was producing cruisers at a pace that could shift the war. The plan was simple on paper: get in, plant charges, get out. Reality was different. They infiltrated aboard a stolen cargo hauler hidden among crates of raw ore. Once inside the shipyard, the sheer scale of the place hit them. Docks the size of cities, starships hanging like sleeping beasts, workers swarming like ants. It was a machine, and they were a handful of blades trying to cut its heart. Cale split the team. Threx and Tolan went for the munitions depots, Nivra and Dren for the engine cores. Cale himself would handle the command hub. Alone, he moved through the service corridors, disabling cameras, breaking necks where silence was needed. When the charges were set, the alarms started earlier than expected. Someone had tripped a motion sensor. Cale didn't hesitate. He told the team to finish and evacuate while he stayed to delay pursuit. As the shipyard's internal security closed in, Cale took cover behind machinery, trading fire and forcing them to slow their advance. He made it to the escape shuttle. With seconds to spare, the shockwave of the detonations chasing them into space. By now, Kyle's name was spreading beyond Coalition borders. Mercenaries, warlords, and even civilian traders were telling stories of the Deathworld fighter who led impossible missions and walked away. Some said he couldn't be killed. Cale hated the myth. It made enemies underestimate the cost of survival. The next assignment was personal. A remnant of the Empire from Karvek Prime had resurfaced, gathering strength on a remote fortress world. The Coalition wanted it crushed before it could rally allies. But this time, they didn't send an army. They sent Cale's team, approaching. The fortress meant crossing kilometers of open terrain under heavy artillery fire. Instead of going head-on, Cale led the team underground, through ancient lava tunnels from a dormant volcano. It was dark, airless, and claustrophobic, but it got them close without detection. They emerged inside the fortress walls, launching a sudden assault from within. The defenders panicked, fighting both inward and outward battles as the team dismantled their defenses. Kyle personally took down the fortress commander, a warlord who had once been the enemy's greatest gladiator. When the fortress fell, Kyle saw fear in the eyes of the surviving soldiers, not of the coalition, but of him. The war didn't end. It never truly did. Empires rose, alliances broke, and Kyle's missions blurred together over the years. His team changed, members, lost and replaced, but the core remained, dangerous people willing to follow him into hell. One day, decades later, Kyle stood on the balcony of a coalition outpost on a border world. Below, traders from a dozen species mingled in the market, and children played without fear. It was a rare moment of peace. An old soldier approached him, a veteran from the early days of the war. "They say you fought in 5 major conflicts, outlived 3 empires, and never lost a battle," the soldier said. "How?" Kyle didn't answer right away. He watched the market, the movement of life going on, despite the galaxy's cruelty. Finally, he said, "I don't fight to win. I fight so they get to live long enough to forget the war." That night, alone in his quarters, Kyle looked over a holomap of the galaxy. More threats were coming. They always would. But he'd be ready. He always had been.